Keisha, I want to thank you for the beautiful and most expressive way you read from the Torah this morning. This heartbreaking story of a deception by one brother against another. In your own way, with your love and gift of drama, you evoked in your reading in both Hebrew and English the pity and terror that all of us will have felt when Esau realizes that Jacob has, not for the first time, but for the second time, deceived him and stolen the blessing reserved for the firstborn son. From the beginning of this week's parashah, the tension between Esau and Jacob is apparent. Rebekah's struggle to become pregnant results with the conception of twins and great discomfort as these babies struggle with each other within the womb and press against her womb. So great is her pain that she goes to inquire of God, who announces to her, "Two peoples are in your belly. 2 nations shall branch off from each other from your womb. One people shall prevail over the other. The elder shall serve the younger." There are 2 ways in which we can read this prophecy. One is that God is predicting the conflict that's going to exist between Rebekah's 2 sons, Esau and Jacob. Jacob is going to force Esau to give up his birthright for a bowl of lentils, and in your portion, Acacia, Jacob is going to deceive his father and steal Esau's blessing. That will, as we know, end with Esau's dismay and anger against his brother when he discovers that he's been cheated out of the blessing. From this moment, the Torah tells us that Esau bears a grudge against Jacob and forms the resolve to kill his brother once his father is dead. But there is another way of reading this text. The enmity is not only this fraternal resentment, but symbolizes a later hostility that emerges between 2 nations, the descendants of Esau and Jacob. For Jacob, who will become the progenitor of the 12 tribes and whose name will be changed to Israel, represents the Jewish people at a later stage of their history, while Esau, who was the ancestor of the Edomites, becomes a symbol of the people of Edom, a neighboring nation to Israel, with whom there were frequent conflicts. That is why in the traditional Haftarah for this morning, which we did not read, and which comes from the last of the prophets, Malachi, the prophet preaches an uncomfortable message of God's preference for Jacob over Esau. "I have loved Jacob and hated Esau, making his hills a desolation, giving his heritage to jackals." Nowhere in our story of Esau and Jacob are we told that God hated Esau. In fact, our sympathies lie with Esau and are critical of Jacob, as indeed the rabbis themselves were later on critical of his behavior. But written at a much later time, the prophet is referring not to the brothers, but to the nations of Israel and Edom, a territory that bordered ancient Israel to the south, in what is now southwestern Jordan, between the Dead Sea and the Gulf of Aqaba. And the prophet specifically highlights the special relationship between Israel and God, despite Israel's scorn of her faith and her dishonorable conduct. In later times, the name of Edom, Esau, came to be associated with Rome, and when the rabbis wanted to draw attention to the depredations of Roman idolatry and the purity of Israel they used the figures of Esau and Jacob as a way of referring to Rome and to themselves in order not to get into trouble with the occupying forces by referring overtly to Rome or to Israel. When Constantine made Christianity the dominant religion of the Roman Empire and the persecution of Jews continued from the Roman into the Christian era, the figures of Esau and Jacob were used again to express this rivalry between the two religions. In both rabbinic literature and the early church fathers, we see Jews and Christians claiming Jacob as the symbol of their people, Jacob as Israel, the Jewish people on the one hand, and Jacob as the new Israel, Christianity on the other. Each religion for centuries sought to claim truth and superiority over the other, one stating that it was the parent religion and had come first, the other claiming that it was the fulfillment of the Old Testament and superseded the Old. Mercifully, much has changed in the way that Jews and Christians relate to each other, and we have come a very long way from denying each other's truth. It is possible to acknowledge dignity in each person's difference and to accept that truth is not an exclusive concept bound to a single belief or single idea. Truth is elusive, hard to grasp, rare, often too difficult to express because it can be painful, hurtful, divisive even. I have avoided speaking of the war between Israel and Gaza so far this Shabbat, the first time in 6 weeks. And yet, how do we know what is truth? How do we interpret what we are shown at second or third hand and discern its verity? How can we build something that is truthful, that has integrity, without allowing ourselves to be persuaded by propaganda, populism, or misrepresentation? And how do we therefore know how to think, how to speak, or what to do? There are truths that are the darkest of instruments deep inside ourselves that we can scarcely acknowledge, let alone speak about. Truth can make us feel deeply conflicted. Was Jacob tormented by that moment of untruth as he stood before his father and said, "I am Esau, your firstborn"? Or did he perhaps believe that he was, in some truthful sense, Isaac's firstborn, and therefore merited the blessing that was given to him? Aviva Zornberg, in her commentary to this story, sees Jacob as entering into the world of ambiguities, equivocations, mimicries. He has to experience alienation before he can remake himself, before he can truly become how he was described at the beginning of this week's Sedra, the Ish Tam, the man of integrity, the man of truth, and therefore be open to the transformations that are going to take place in his life. Perhaps the most honest way of understanding truth is Abraham Joshua Heschel's vision of truth, not as something fixed and rigid, but as a pendulum in perpetual motion. Swinging back and forth, the arc described by the pendulum is truth. If you stop the pendulum anywhere along the arc and you say, this point here at the zenith, right here, that's truth. Or if you stop it down here at the midpoint and say, that's truth, you're wrong. You'll always be wrong. because the truth is the pendulum. And you know this because you've lived and you've experienced life and all of its struggles. And you know that it is always a pendulum. It is always in motion. Acacia. It has been Susanna's and my great privilege to accompany you on this journey to your bat mitzvah today. I think all of us here would agree that you are immensely accomplished, intelligent, talented, musical, outgoing and confident, but also sweet and modest. Not only do you sing, as we heard so beautifully last night, but you play the saxophone and piano. You like history and creative writing, including poetry. You enjoy all kinds of sport and drama. And it is impressive to hear how influential on your own life is the theme of service to others, which has played such an important role in the lives of your family. I know that this community of the LJS is important to you, as it has been important and remains significant in the lives of your family. This is a place that carries many memories for your family that go back 4 generations to your great-grandparents. I hope that even if you do go away to school for your teenage years, you will retain a strong pride in your Jewish heritage and an affection for this synagogue, for what it teaches about Judaism and what it can contribute to our society and to the world. Amen. Now